Let me start today by asking you something a little uncomfortable.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, it's a question that just kept popping up in the research we were looking at for this deep dive, and honestly, it's kind of been stuck in my head ever since.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's this paradox that I think we all feel, but we rarely actually articulate. How is it possible that we are currently living as the single most connected generation in human history?
Right.
I mean, we have instant messaging, video calls to the other side of the planet, thousands of followers, yet millions of people feel deeply, painfully invisible.
It really feels like a glitch in the system, doesn't it? Like, you can be connected to everyone, technically. You can have a device in your pocket that links you to, what, 4 billion people?
Literally half the globe.
Exactly. But you can still sit in your apartment on a Friday night and feel completely untethered from the world.
That's the feeling. You can have a group chat just blowing up on your phone. You're seeing what your friends from high school had for breakfast, but you're sitting there feeling this profound isolation. And what we're looking at today suggests that this isn't just a bad week or, a mood. It's officially being called an epidemic.
And I know we use that word a lot lately.
Oh, I do.
But in this case, the data is genuinely alarming. It's not hyperbole.
No, it's not.
If we look at the source material, specifically the advisory from the U.S. Surgeon General in 2023, loneliness has been officially declared a public health crisis.
Yeah.
And I want to be really clear about what that means.
Please do.
Because we tend to think of loneliness as just an emotion, like something sad that happens in your head, like nostalgia or grief. But the research is very clear here. It is a biological event.
The stakes are just terrifyingly high. I read this one statistic in the STAG that I actually had to double check because it seemed impossible.
The smoking one.
The smoking one. It said that chronic loneliness increases your mortality risk by the same amount as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
That is the statistic that usually stops people in their tracks. I mean, we have entire public health campaigns about smoking.
Right, warnings on the box.
Exactly. We know obesity is a health risk. We know a sedentary lifestyle is bad. But we rarely view social isolation as a biological threat of that exact same magnitude.
We just treat it as a personal feeling or a temporary social problem.
Right. But if you look at the data, heart disease, stroke, dementia, loneliness is a massive accelerator for all of them.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly why this is happening to you. We're going to look at the evolutionary reasons why we feel this way, the neuroscience of what loneliness actually does to your physical brain, because it's wild.
It really is.
And then, most importantly, we're going to cover the practical framework the sources provide for actually curing it. Not just distracting yourself from it, but curing it. And spoiler alert, the answer isn't just go out more.
If going out more was the cure, we'd have fixed this by now.
Exactly.
The solution is much more nuanced and, frankly, a bit more demanding.
Okay, let's start with the biology, because I think this is where most of us get it wrong. We think loneliness is just feeling sad. But the research suggests it's actually a survival alarm. Why does it physically hurt?
To understand that, you have to look at human history. We have to go back to the savannah.
Okay, let's go.
For about 99% of our existence as a species, tribe equaled survival, period. If you were separated from your group, you didn't just feel sad, you were dead.
You were prey.
Exactly. You couldn't hunt, you couldn't defend yourself, you couldn't sleep safely. So isolation meant death.
So our bodies are hardwired to treat being alone not as an inconvenience, but as an immediate emergency.
Precisely. Your nervous system hasn't updated for Wi-Fi.
Wow.
It hasn't updated for the safety of a modern apartment where you have locks on the doors and a fridge full of food. When you feel socially isolated, your body goes into a state of high alert because, evolutionarily speaking, a predator is about to eat you.
And this connects directly to the neuroscience in the report. I found this fascinating. There's a specific part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex.
The ACC, yes, this is a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Right. So usually I skip over the brain anatomy stuff because it gets a little dry, but this blew my mind. The ACC is the same part of the brain that processes physical pain. Like if I stub my toe or burn my hand on the stove, the ACC lights up. And the research shows that this exact same region lights up when we feel socially rejected or isolated.
Which perfectly explains why we use such visceral language to describe social issues.
Oh, like it broke my heart.
Yes. Or I was crushed, or it was a slap in the face. We use physical metaphors because the brain is processing it through the exact same pathway as a physical injury. To your brain, social pain is real pain. It is a warning signal telling you to get back to safety.
That is so vivid. And it's not just the pain, right? It's the stress response. Because if my body thinks I'm about to be eaten by a lion, it's going to dump a lot of chemicals into my system to help me run away.
That's the cortisol spike.
Yeah.
When you are chronically lonely, your body floods with cortisol, the stress hormone. Now, in short bursts, cortisol is great. It helps you run from danger.
Right, fight or flight.
Exactly. But when you're stewing in it for months or years, it raises inflammation levels throughout the entire body. It destroys the quality of your sleep because you're hypervigilant.
Yeah.
And it actually weakens your immune function.
So when we say it's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day, that's the mechanism. It's not magic, it's inflammation.
You are literally marinating in a stress response. Your body is fighting a war against a predator that isn't even there.
But here's where it gets really interesting and honestly kind of tragic. The sources describe something called the loneliness loop.
Yes.
And I think this explains why it's so incredibly hard to just snap out of it.
This is probably the most critical concept to understand if you want to break the cycle.
Yeah.
Because intuition tells us if I'm lonely, I should be desperate for connection. I should be walking up to strangers and shaking their hands.
Right. If I'm hungry, I look for food. If I'm lonely, I should look for people.
But that's not what happens. Remember, your brain thinks you're under threat. So when you feel lonely, you don't become open. You become defensive. You start scanning for rejection. The research shows that lonely people are significantly more likely to interpret a neutral face as an angry or rejecting face.
Wait, really? So if I'm lonely and I see someone just spacing out at a coffee shop, my brain might tell me, that person hates you.
It will tell you that person is a threat. You become hypervigilant. You're essentially wearing rejection-colored glasses.
That is wild. So you're seeing enemies where they don't even exist.
And because you see threats, you withdraw.
Yeah,
You cross your arms. You avoid eye contact. You decline the invitation because you assume you won't be welcome anyway.
Right.
And what does that do? It makes you lonelier, which makes you more defensive, which makes you pull back more. It becomes this totally self-perpetuating cycle.
You're trapped in a loop of trying to stay safe, but the safety is actually killing you. It's like a Chinese finger trap. The harder you pull away, the more stuck you get.
That's the tragedy of it. The mechanism designed to save us, that pain alerting us to reconnect, can actually drive us further apart if we don't understand that our brain is lying to us about the threat level.
So we have this Stone Age brain that panics when we're alone, but we live in a world that seems almost engineered to keep us apart.
Yeah, it really does.
Let's talk about the modern environment, because it's not just our brains, it's our entire lifestyle.
If we look at the structure of modern life, it is engineered for efficiency, not for belonging. We prioritize frictionlessness. We want everything to be fast and easy.
I feel totally called out here. I love frictionless. I love that I can order Thai food without speaking to a human being. I love that I can work from home in my pajamas.
We all do.
But the sources are arguing that this friction I'm avoiding is actually connection.
Exactly. Those small interactions, chatting with the barista, saying hello to a coworker in the elevator, those are the microdoses of social connection.
Yeah.
And we have systematically removed them.
Wow.
We have remote work, which is great for avoiding traffic, but terrible for spontaneous conversation.
Yeah.
We have streaming services, so we don't gather in theaters. We have apps for dating instead of community.
We have replaced proximity with pixels.
Yes.
And we have replaced depth with speed.
Proximity with pixels. That's the key. And consider social media. The algorithms are designed to reward performance. They reward the highlight reel.
Right.
So you are scrolling through social media, seeing everyone else's best moments, their vacations, their parties, their successes.
And you're sitting there in your sweatpants, eating that Thai food alone, feeling like a total loser.
It creates this situation where everyone assumes everyone else is connected and happy,
Yeah.
while silently feeling alone. The source material calls it the world's most synchronized private struggle.
That phrase hit me so hard when I read it. A synchronized private struggle. We're all doing it together, but entirely separately.
And if we zoom out, this isn't just about technology. It's a philosophical shift. We have spent the last few centuries glorifying independence. We view needing others as a weakness. We praise the self-made man.
Right, the rugged individual, the cowboy riding off into the sunset, alone.
But if you go back to the classics, that wasn't the goal at all. Aristotle said man is by nature a social animal. He didn't mean we just like hanging out. He meant it is our nature. It's biological.
Right.
Marcus Aurelius wrote about humans being like hands and feet, made for cooperation. You wouldn't say a hand is weak because it needs the arm.
That's a great reframe.
And even Buddhist teachings emphasize sangha, or community, as one of the three jewels of life. Isolation is not strength. interdependence is.
But we've confused independence with emotional isolation. We think standing alone is strength, but biology says it's vulnerability.
We have learned how to live alone, but we have completely forgotten how to belong.
Okay, so we've set up a world that pushes us apart, and we have a brain that punishes us for it. But let's go deeper into the root cause here, because the sources make a distinction that I think is crucial. And it explains why you can feel lonely even when you have a ton of people around you.
This is the difference between being present and being seen.
I think everyone listening has had that experience. You're at a party, the music is loud, people are talking to you, maybe you're even holding a drink and laughing. But inside you feel completely invisible, like you're watching the party from behind a glass wall.
That happens because true connection requires vulnerability. And vulnerability in our current culture feels dangerous.
It does.
It feels like handing someone a weapon they could use against you.
The source brings up psychologist Brené Brown's definition of connection here. She defines it as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued.
Seen, heard, and valued. That is very different from just communicating. Modern culture teaches us to perform, impress people, win the argument, look strong.
Right.
It does not teach us to reveal, admit, or share our struggles.
That's the difference between posting a photo of your latte with a perfect filter and telling a friend, hey, I'm actually really scared about losing my job. One is performance, the other is vulnerability.
And because we focus on the performance, we hide our true selves. And hiding creates loneliness. If no one knows the real you, then even if they like the performance version of you, the version with the perfect job and the perfect latte, you still feel alone.
Because you know they aren't connecting with the reality, you feel like a fraud. We have group chats with 47 people in them, dropping memes all day, but absolutely no one to call when we're actually crying.
That is not a technology problem. That's a depth problem. We have mastered communication, the transfer of information, but we have forgotten communion, the sharing of life.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem. We're mismatched with our environment. We're terrified of vulnerability, and we're substituting performance for connection. Let's pivot to the solution.
Let's do it.
Because the source is very specific here. The answer is not just go get more friends, which is a huge relief because making friends as an adult is awful.
It is so awkward. It's like dating, but with less clear rules and way more confusion.
Right. Like, do we shake hands? Do we hug? Are we friends now or just colleagues who tolerate each other?
Exactly. But the solution isn't about quantity. It's not a numbers game. The most effective solution is about intentional depth. You don't need more people. You need fewer, deeper connections.
The framework they propose has 4 practical steps. Let's walk through them for you listening. Step 1 is something they call micro-vulnerability.
I love this concept because it is so actionable. It breaks that all-or-nothing fear. You don't need to confess your deepest childhood trauma to the cashier at the grocery store.
Please don't do that.
Right. The rule is simply, go 10% deeper in one conversation today.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here. Isn't that risky? If I'm at work and my boss asks, how are you? And I start talking about my existential dread, that's not going to go well.
That's where the micro comes in. It's not about oversharing or lacking professional boundaries. It's about replacing the robotic answer with a human one.
Okay.
So a standard interaction is, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? That's a script.
It's just meaningless noise.
10% deeper is, how are you? And you say, honestly, I've been a little overwhelmed this week, but I'm pushing through. You aren't asking them to fix it. You're just signaling reality.
It's just a tiny crack in the armor, like I'm tired or I'm really excited about this weekend.
Exactly. And the principle here is that depth invites depth. When you lower your shield just an inch, it gives the other person permission to lower theirs. It signals safety. It changes the dynamic from 2 robots talking to 2 humans talking.
Okay, that feels manageable. Step 2 is repeated contact. Now, this sounds a bit like homework.
It is homework, in a way.
Okay.
This gets back to how we evolved. We didn't make scheduled coffee dates with our tribe. We just lived together. We saw each other every single day. Belonging relies on repetition.
So the advice is to join something that meets weekly.
Weekly is key. A fitness class, a book club, a volunteer group, a faith community. It honestly doesn't matter what the activity is as much as the frequency.
Why is the frequency so important? Why can't I just go to a great party once a month?
Because of something called the mere exposure effect. Psychologically, we tend to like things and people simply because we see them often. Frequency creates familiarity. Familiarity creates safety. And safety creates connection.
So if I show up to the same running club every Tuesday at 6 p.m., Eventually, my brain stops scanning those people for threats and starts seeing them as my tribe, even if I'm not best friends with them yet.
Exactly. It takes all the pressure off. You don't have to be charming instantly. You just have to be there consistently.
Step 3 is a tough one for me, personally. Reduce passive consumption.
This is the social media trap. We mentioned earlier that the brain can be tricked. When you scroll through your feed, your brain gets a sort of snack of social interaction. It sees faces, it hears voices, it feels like you're interacting.
But it's empty calories. It's like eating celery when you need a steak.
It's actually worse. It's an illusion that prevents you from seeking the real thing. Your brain thinks it's socializing, but you aren't getting the hormonal release of oxytocin that comes from real connection.
Right.
So the advice is, replace 30 minutes of passive scrolling with one active action.
Active meaning what exactly?
A phone call, a voice note, a face-to-face meetup. Even a personalized text is better than just a like. Move from passive observation to active engagement.
I've actually started doing the voice note thing. It felt weird at first, recording myself. But getting a voice note back where you can hear your friend laughing or hear the tone in their voice, it feels so much closer than just words on a screen.
It conveys nuance and emotion. It breaks the pixels barrier we talked about and brings back a bit of humanity. It proves there was a real person on the other end.
And finally, step 4, rebuild self-connection. This seems a bit paradoxical. We're trying to connect with others, so why focus on ourselves? Isn't that what got us into this mess?
Not quite. There is a huge difference between isolation and solitude.
Okay.
External loneliness often mirrors internal fragmentation. If you are disconnected from yourself, if you don't know what you feel, or you're constantly distracting yourself so you don't have to sit with your own thoughts, you cannot possibly connect deeply with someone else.
You can't share what you don't know you have.
Precisely. If you are uncomfortable in your own skin, you will constantly perform for others to make them like you. And we already established that performance prevents connection. So practices like journaling, therapy, or even just taking silent walks without your headphones, these are essential.
It's about becoming a host to yourself. If you aren't at home, no one can come visit you.
That's a beautiful way to put it. You have to inhabit yourself first.
The source uses a really powerful metaphor to wrap all this up, the fire metaphor. And I think this is the image I want everyone to leave with today.
Yes. This sums it up perfectly. Loneliness is like sitting in a cold, dark room. Social media and our digital connections are like watching a high-definition video of a fireplace on a screen.
It looks warm, it crackles, it sounds like a fire.
But if you get close to it, it's just cold glass. It generates absolutely no heat. It doesn't warm you up. Real connection, that messy, awkward, vulnerable interaction we've been talking about, that is sitting around an actual fire.
And real fires are annoying. They smoke, they spark, you have to chop the wood, it's work.
Exactly. It might be messy, you might get a little dirty, you might say the wrong thing. Yeah. But it provides the actual warmth that keeps you alive. That warmth is what the source calls psychological oxygen.
And look at the benefits when you finally get that oxygen. It's not just feeling fuzzy. Anxiety drops. Confidence rises. Your physical health improves. Inflammation literally goes down. You find deeper meaning in your day-to-day life.
It's about functioning as the human animal was designed to function.
It changes everything.
It really does.
It's interesting when you look at it this way. Loneliness isn't a personal failure. And I think that's the most important takeaway for me. If you're feeling lonely right now, it's not because you're broken.
No, you are not lonely because you are unworthy or unlovable. You are lonely because modern life fragments human depth. The environment is stacked against you. The stream is flowing towards isolation.
Which means fighting back, reaching out, being vulnerable, joining that club is actually a radical act.
It is. It's an act of rebellion against the efficiency trap.
So here's the challenge for you listening right now. The source ends with a call to action, and we're going to pass it straight on to you.
Do the radical thing today.
Don't just double tap a photo. Don't just send a generic happy birthday text.
Tell someone how you actually feel, and ask them how they really are.
Epidemics end one real conversation at a time.
It starts with being brave enough to be the first one to drop the shield.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. What if the person you're assuming is too busy or too successful to talk to you is actually sitting at home feeling the exact same way, just waiting for someone to make the first move?
Well, yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Go find your fire. We'll see you next time.